Thank you all so much for having us. We're really excited to share our project with y'all today and get your feedback. My name is Olivia Hernandez. I'm going to be starting off our presentation. So SOLAS began in the fall of 2020 when myself, Xavier Noakes, who may or may not be pulling up our manifold at the moment, and Lindegren, who are all creative media graduate students at Arizona State together. We came together in an independent study in order to collaboratively learn Touch Designer, which is a visual programming language developed by Derivative. As artists, I should say that we each arrived at our learning from very different aesthetics and creative backgrounds. I myself am more of a visual artist who's well-versed in Adobe Creative Suite. Xavier is a phenomenal interactive artist who comes bread and butter out of AME program. And is a phenomenal interactive dance performance, but we're very much coming from very different creative backgrounds. And that's what makes Touch Designer so seductive as a program, is that it's very rich and powerful, and it's capable of a range of mediated outputs, everything from generative images to audio reactive visualizations, video compositions, and more, making it an excellent tool for satiating our complementary creative desires. Yet early in our learning process, we were approached by faculty members about applying our skill sets to the unique challenge of ameliorating workplace wellness for employees through a National Science Foundation Future of Workplace Wellness study. And so to do this, we began to consider how visual design intersects with wellness needs. We used building standards and focused on standards such as air, water, but especially light as guiding aesthetic materials. And as media artists, light is an essential element to our creative making, and we began to conceive of a mediated experience that referenced illumination, atmosphere, and fluidity. And we named this experience SOLAS, alt in brackets as a reference to the Python syntax that Touch Designer employs, and solas meaning brightness in Latin. Our design principles are based on workplace wellness research, which clearly suggests that the focus of workplace wellness intervention should be about counteracting sedentary behaviors and creating conditions for healthy emotional well-being. And research has actually shown that reallocating 30 minutes of a day of sedentary time with either standing or LPA, low physical activity, particularly in individuals who do not engage in sufficient or moderate to vigorous physical activity, which is probably all of us in this last year, can result in health benefits such as improved cardiometabolic health and reduce the risk of all-cause mortality. And then with respect specifically to mental health well-being, there is recent evidence showing that reallocating 30 minutes a day of sedentary time to low physical activity can actually be associated with a decrease in the odds of poor mental well-being. And specifically in the office, I think that this can translate explicitly to workplace fatigue. So our designs instead create opportunities for increased physical activities alongside this promotion of mindfulness and relaxation, agency, world building, and community-based collaboration. And I will pass it on to my colleague, Ree.
Thanks, Olivia. Hi. So something else we were thinking about within this experience is the relationship between movement and wellness. And it was really important to us to have different aspects of movement and stillness. So we're thinking about dynamic and static movement as we explored the piece. And we were thinking about what each of us could bring to the table in our own prior workplace experiences and workplace culture. So as a result of that, each of us brought to the table different aspects that were looking at either stillness and motion, or motion. And so you'll see, like, as we move through the pieces and the examples, especially if you're in the manifold and you want to explore. For example, in mine, Dia Spectra, I was looking at the relationship between diaphragmatic breathing and the parasympathetic nervous system. So thinking about how you could calm down the nervous system that is on a hyperdrive. Your sympathetic nervous system goes on overdrive many times in response to stress. So if you're in a stressful workplace environment, you need a way to calm down. And so for my piece specifically, I was looking at how you could breathe from your diaphragm, encourage breath to go in by asking people to either sit down or lay down, find a way to release their pelvis in some way. And then all of the visuals were connected to breath and from an audio cues. And then for Olivia's piece, what you're seeing right now on the screen. In her piece, the experience was about choice and choice of movement. So you could sit or stand. You had an audio controller that was moving in response or using the controller to move in response to the media on the screen. So you could choose your own adventure, build your own world. And so there were options for stillness or for movement. And Xavier's piece, the focus was on movement. So it asked you to, the piece asked you to move through the space, and then there were visuals that were happening in response to that activity. You can see this like dynamic range of movement that's happening. Oh, that's my piece right there, Dia Spectra. And then that's Liv's piece. Great, thank you for the guided photo experience. And then over here is Xavier's piece, looking at these like relationships between light and motion and movement. So encouraging play in all aspects of the piece. And I'm going to pass it over to Xavier.
Sorry, sharing screen and trying to facilitate this. I am going to talk a little bit about kind of the tech and software side of things for our piece. So as mentioned before by Olivia, we chose to work inside of Touch Designer, not only because we were already kind of focused on it, but it was a fairly organic transition from thinking about movement, engaging the body, engaging elements of workplace wellness, which is categorized and defined much more in depth in our paper. But thinking about this kind of transition of what kind of environment do we want to be working in terms of media and technology, and how do we translate that relationship into code, into a media-rich environment. And so Touch Designer, similar to Max MSP for anybody here that might use it, is a node-based program which uses wires to interlink different nodes of different kind of family types, and each of them facilitate different functionalities. So they're essentially like little capsulized modules of compositing or shifting the range of a value and scaling it up and down, or any number of kind of functionalities are all available. So it was really rich for us because we were able to have a mixture of rich media tools that are already functioning, already available, but also the ability to discretely work with different data types, different environments, different work types, and that was really, really rich for us. Additionally, we used a space called the iStage, which is located on our campus. It's one of our research spaces. It's essentially a very beefed up, very fancy, quote-unquote, research environment that includes full surround sound speakers, a projection system onto the floor, IR camera, as well as some very high-end MacBook Pros and Windows machines. Full soundboard and lighting system as well. So it's got pretty much everything we could hope for. So that was really, 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 of course, amazing for us to be able to, even in the midst of COVID, work in such a rich and interesting space. And I definitely think that we probably would not have gotten as far as we did without being able to work in that space. And then finally, we used a microcontroller circuit that I designed over the last couple of years called Companion Number 2. Essentially, it's a compact movement, light, and hopefully soon touch capacitive sensing microcontroller that uses OSC to stream data into whatever kind of environment you're working in, whether that's Max or whether that's Touch Designer, what have you. It's something that I have created and been working on. Is very much so inspired by our own Jessica Reiko's wearable project that she has had for quite a few years, I believe. And so it's similar, but also more specific to kind of the goals that I was trying to accomplish at the time. And with that, I will pass it to Olivia.
Thanks, Xavier. If you could pull up World Builder, the long video, and then as I'm speaking, just scroll through my images. Thank you. You're doing a great job. So yes, World Builder is one of 3 pieces that belongs in this SOLAS mediated experience. And for me as a designer, I was interested in exploring how mediated environments activated specifically by very discrete movements of participants might enable a flow state that then engenders a sense of well-being or wellness and calm for its participants. This piece specifically affords its participants the opportunity to visually build worlds by controlling landscape height maps, atmospheric visual representations, as well as accompanying audio tracks that are used to create a customized environment that is to their liking, and all crafted and composed by Touch Designer, but built or actuated through these discrete microcontrollers designed by Xavier. So participants, as you can see in this video, are invited to either sit or stand in front of a front projected triptych fabricated out of muslin and PVC, and they're operating these controllers, which themselves measure differences in movement data to control these audiovisual cues. The movement data that's being measured includes Euler angles, linear accelerations, and quaternions. This is a new word that I learned this year, and it's one of my favorites. And then it communicates these changes to Touch Designer through open sound control. So what we're experiencing then is participants and system engaged in a really beautiful symbiotic dance or collaboration of responsivity, where these discrete human movements give form to a mediated world, and then this mediated world in turn engenders an escapist sense of well-being. But this is all running on the current of a flow state, right? So what is flow state? Very quickly, for many of us who know this or just need a refresher, this is a term that has been in existence, and experience has certainly been in existence for thousands of years, but popularly coined in 1975 by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi and Jean Nakamura. And these flow states result from an individual's full immersion in an activity, resulting in an energized focus and process of enjoyment. So some of the most important characteristics of flow, I'm not going to get into all of them, but a lot of them are immediate feedback, complete concentration on the task at hand, and most importantly, a loss of self-conscious rumination and feeling of control over the task at hand. And so some activities that might engender this include knitting, meditation, painting, and so I'm really interested in world building fitting into that landscape of activity that engenders a flow state. I'd like it to incite a flow state in its participants through these discrete gestures, and consequently resulting in highly scaled but ultimately immersive and ultimately customizable experience. And I think we are at almost time. Thank you, Garrett. So Xavier, if you'd like to talk about your piece quickly.
Yeah, so I will talk a little bit about my piece as well as the sort of future evolutions that we've been discussing. As of now, we were just approved for an IRB study, which we are hoping to conduct either over the summer or into the fall. So that's really exciting for us because, of course, this project is really interesting and cool from our perspective, but we need to definitely test efficacy and the effects that it has on how people are interacting with and engaging with the systems. We've also been very aware in our discussions about what this might look like in the future, in recognizing that not every workplace has an iStage or is willing to fork up the money to build the space, build the infrastructure, set up the equipment, and maintain the equipment. So we're also very much so aware of and thinking of scalability, adaptability, and low-cost solutions to how this might become a portable or smaller scale installation for people to engage with. So those are both really exciting kind of developments that we have been looking at, but we have not started actively working with as of yet. And then finally, to wrap up with my piece, so my piece is taking advantage of one of Touch Designer's most helpful and interesting sort of affordances, which is the process of instancing. So instancing, for anybody who doesn't know, is a process of taking a geometry or like a source file and creating multiple instances of it where you can individually address the different attributes of it. So think like your rotation, as well as the color and things like that. I'm gonna bring up my piece. So instances are really amazing because you're able to create a large swath of geometry or of source files and to individually address each of them and their characteristics in real time. So this is computationally very, very cheap as opposed to just like copying a file 1,000, 100,000 times. And so this created this particle system that you can see is swirling and moving and following people based on their position and movement in the space. The relationship with this system is really interesting to me because it not only addresses this need for movement, but also kind of being static, being stationary. And the fact that you become a force, you become an attractor, you become a drive for this particle system to follow you and move around you, but also have its sort of its own mind. Not really, I mean, it's being driven by noise, but it does, from kind of the outsider perspective, invoke this sense of, oh, this is an organic or a living or a self-aware sort of thing that wants to play with me, to move with me, to engage with me. So all of these elements really kind of encompassed how I approached my specific piece of shifting stars. And it's definitely been one of the most interesting things that I've gotten to do in the past year of COVID. So I really appreciate it. And I believe that might be our time. Yes. So just to wrap it up, I will say that we all really, really enjoyed working on this piece and to thank everybody for being here with us today. Thank you.